a moment where we're crossing the threshold of a livable, habitable planet. And that is not really debatable, sadly. And if we just keep arguing, I like Joe Rogan, I like CNN, I like Fox, whatever, we're going to just wake up with our children and grandchildren living in an uninhabitable world. And that's really heartbreaking. And this world is beautiful. And let's invest in society and this planet.
I want to understand your perspectives on things. Not necessarily on political things, but maybe on how do we engage with political things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think actually you and I have very similar political views. I think that we both sort of grew up in a progressive sort of place. At least I did. My family's Jewish and religious Jewish, so that there's a conservatism about the religion, but my mom's a scientist, and there was always like a sort of like liberal progressive bent to her thinking and to how I was brought up. But over time I've come to this place where I feel like when I look at other people who I disagree with, or who I used to have this thing where I felt like I had to change them or convince them of something, to convince them that I was right and they were wrong or something like that. And over time I started to feel like there is wisdom in different people's perspectives, and everybody's got their own wisdom. And maybe sometimes there are things that I think that are harmful, like obviously there's things that are objectively harmful, like if, the Nazis in Germany, objectively harmful, certain policies that are implemented right now, objectively harmful. But at the same time, I'm trying to avoid, pushing away the people that I think I really need to have conversations with, by trying to tell them, no, this is what you believe is wrong and what you need to change, which I think a lot of people end up fleeing from that. And sometimes I think it's better to try to have like deep conversations about things that are maybe less controversial at first, so that they can get a little bit of more wisdom to be able to have a foundation to be able to understand and accept the things that are maybe more controversial that we might need to convince them of. You know what I mean? So so I don't know, let me just tell you also, as part of the context of this, when I started thinking about what this meditation magazine issue should be, like last year it was the peace issue, because it was what was going on in Ukraine, what was going on in the Middle East, terrible things that needed to be hopefully moving toward peace. In this year, in 2025, it feels like more of what's here at home in this country is sort of turning into, some people see it as turning into fascism. Some people see it as the opposite of that. Some people think that there's more freedom now. But for me, my perspective has been looking like this is turning toward fascism. But at the same time, I don't want, if I present it that way, then that it makes a lot of the Trump voters like run away and not listen. But when I think about what we need to do in this issue, when I saw your posts on social media right after the election, I remember I was thinking, okay, like I'm sure some good things will happen, some bad things will happen, like everything will be okay. And then I saw your post on social media that said something like, everything will be okay. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it said, except if you're a woman or a Muslim or LGBT, or, and it went through like a whole bunch of different types of people who will be oppressed essentially under this regime. So I think that post, more than anything, led me to think, okay, I need to engage with this. I can't just like rest in my privilege, my privileged like white passing like existence, and just be like, okay, I'll be fine, when a lot of people will not be fine. So that's what made me decide to engage in this issue with what's going on in the United States, instead of doing something like the art issue or the psychedelic issue or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Good for you. So with this interview, what are we using this for, or what are you using it for?
So two things. One is I sincerely am seeking your wisdom, and that I want to understand, through our conversation, maybe like we can come to some kind of deep understanding and realizations about how we should engage and what ways are good to engage. And then also, I think that that is part of the issue. That is part of the magazine. Like that, how do we engage? It's not just about what the issues are, like
Right.
DEI, deportations, all that. It's also how we engage with others. Um, and I think that that's a core part of the issue. So it's both of those things. It's learning from you, and learning from our conversation, not just from you, but from our mutual diving into this. But then also, to be able to help to allow others to learn from this conversation as well. That's
And
my
then
sort of
is
goal.
this a podcast or video or both or social, or is it an excerpt in the magazine, or just practically?
All of the above.
Okay.
So like what
So
we're
I know
recording here.
who sort of
Yeah.
what mediums we're talking to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what we're recording here, what I usually do, like I don't know if I told you I did interview with Jill Stein last week, so we published that in the full context, the full format, basically unedited. And then we also published like little clips of that, so that we're continuously publishing little clips of that, and then also excerpts will be in the magazine, but it's more than excerpts actually. It's also the thesis of the magazine is still being formed,
Mhm.
and the thesis is going to depend in large part on my like sort of fundamental feeling and conclusion about how we should approach this. And these conversations influence what the thesis will be. So it's not just the excerpts, it's actually influencing the thesis of the whole issue and how the entire issue will develop.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope that's clarifying.
No, it is. I love it. Yeah, you remember I used to publish Elephant as a physical magazine, and
Yeah.
the fruition or evolution of a magazine issue is always, if you have both a light touch and a discernment and caring behind it, that's just like gardening or something. It's best.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, that because we have a thesis for each issue, like in the last issue, we had sort of two theses for the peace issue. One was, so the sort of the big question is like, how do we help make peace in the world, when we're just individuals in this huge landscape. So one of the theses was that we can, each person cultivating peace inside of themselves is bringing peace into the world through their own person, um, and through spreading it to their families, to their communities, etc. The other thesis was basically about nonviolence. That there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. So those two theses essentially defined the entire issue and ran through every article. So in this issue about, um, sort of about what's going on in the United States right now and how we respond to it,
Yeah.
there's several like key themes that I'm really exploring, and I'm honestly still in this sort of confused state. To be like frank with you, I'm still confused about what's the best way to approach it.
Yeah.
So, for example, I grew up. So, and I think the thing that really drives me is that I grew up Jewish in these Jewish schools, and they always said, are your grandparents, like my grandparents, were in concentration camps, and many of their families were killed, and we like have a responsibility to remember that that type of thing can happen. Like Germany had been a relatively decent country before that, it was like democratic and everything, pretty civilized. That we should remember that that can happen, and that can happen here in the United States too, and that we should be vigilant and not let that happen.
Yeah.
And when I saw, I mean, many things happening in the past few years, but when I see the Trump administration, and I think this looks like it's sliding into fascism. It kind of like looked like that for a long time already, um, and that this guy has the potential to become a dictator, like a Maduro or like a Putin or Castro or whatever. Um, and I think, okay, maybe this is the time that they warned us about when we were little, and we need to stand up and do something.
Mhm.
And so then I happened to run into Marianne Williamson here in Miami, at like next to my apartment building, basically at the book fair. And that turned into a really wonderful interview. But her perspective is actually, I think, very similar to yours, which is, we need to do something to stop fascism from developing. And like we need to speak out and like really draw the parallels to 1940s Germany. We need to like really like be wary and be and sound the alarm, basically. And went through I always wanted to talk to Marianne Williamson, so I was very happy for that interview, and we did another one afterward. But I did feel like a sense in my gut that there was like a sense of anxiety and alarmism that I was slightly uncomfortable with, that I was worried that it would become a partisan thing where we would be turning away like half of our readers or whatever, because half of the country is enamored with Trump in whatever way. They're getting different information where they think that certain thing that we get different information on different parts of the political spectrum, because we have sort of these propaganda stations like CNN versus Fox, for example. Both of them are presenting one side of a very complex story. And you could say one of them is more accurate and the other is less accurate or something like that. But fundamentally, both of them are presenting narratives that are supposed to be cohesive by leaving out parts that go against those narratives. So what I end up seeing is I see that we have these sort of two propaganda channels, or multiple, and then we have these bubbles growing in different parts of the country, where there's like a liberal bubble in different places, there's conservative bubbles or Trumpian bubbles or whatever in different places, where inside of those bubbles, people are getting wildly different information, different narratives, different views on the world. In some cases, different facts. In most cases, different opinions and viewpoints and perspectives. And I guess what I'm trying to explore in this issue, for one thing, is like, how do we even know what's real? Because when we have all there's so much propaganda, how do we even know what's true? How do we know that we are not brainwashed? You know what I mean? Like, and that's part of meditation to me, is being able to see clearly through sort of the clouds of thought, which is essentially what the propaganda is. It's clouds of thought, sort of dualistic, one-sided thought. And if we can try to calm our minds and see clearly, then maybe we can see a more vivid and more crisp, accurate picture of reality. So that's sort of one theme that I'm playing with in this issue. And then the other themes are like actually specific policies, like DEI. Like, why are some people against that? Like, to me, that was mind blowing that people would be against that. Why is that a thing? The deportations. Why are people okay with this? Why is this something that people want? These were things that I was sort of mind blown by. Just like with the border wall in the first presidency, I was like, why do people care about that? That they want to spend billions of dollars on a wall? Like, I don't get it. So basically, having conversations with people who do want those things, who do believe in those things, or support those policies, has been very illuminating to try to understand why people care about these things, whether it's like just racism, or whether it's like being brainwashed by a cult, or whether it's actually based in some fundamental, like, reasonable principles, has been a very interesting exploration. So that's a whole other sort of exploration in the issue. And then now with this conversation with you, I'm also trying to explore, like, how do we even approach this whole thing in the first place? Do we take the warrior stance of the Marianne Williamson and the WaylonLewis, which is, like, hey, we're gonna, shout from the rooftops our views, our opinions, our perspectives, and whoever doesn't like it can go to hell, and like whoever likes it can come into our circle, and then
well, to be fair, I have a huge difference of opinion with Marianne Williamson.
Right.
And I sent you a bunch of links to like things we posted. So my approach isn't just yell and fuck everyone else who doesn't agree with me and let's start my own cult.
I don't. I know. Yeah. Maybe I misphrased that, and I don't think Marianne does that either. When I actually asked her about something like this, she said, I asked her about pushing people away by fighting with people. And she said, I don't see it in terms of fighting. I don't see it as standing against. I see it as standing for something.
Yeah, I mean, she's great at messaging and phrases like that. But I mean, I don't know if you want to ask a question here, but like my approach is basically not to be over. I mean, I'm a Buddhist meditator, grew up in that community. From a very simple point of view, forgetting about liberal or MAGA or MAHA or any term, I always say, like, if Trump, banged his head and woke up tomorrow deeply empathetic and caring about, the future of our children in terms of a livable planet and in terms of ethics and, paying subcontractors and, maybe not sexually assaulting people or peeping behind, a teenage pageant that he owned, which he did and talked about openly. I mean, it's not really a debatable thing that he's a malignant person. Like, we literally put the fox in charge of the hen house, and the hen house is democracy and the planet we have to live on. And you have children, there's children in my life, without going into that too much. And every Maha, every MAGA, everyone who cares about their children or grandchildren has to care about a livable planet where people are safe. And, I just wrote something like, it sounds cliche, but like, true happiness is not being a billionaire. You look at any billionaire and most of them look pretty unhappy. Some of them get, and we know this from meditation, get overly identified with our unhappiness and want to take it out on others. And there's a certain joy in that. You feel good when you're self-righteous and you're fixing things aggressively in your mind and you're better than everyone else. But ultimately, like, when you look at Warren Buffett or someone like that, there's hopefully some sort of grandfatherly kindness and, noblesse oblige, where you want to build libraries and you want to fund museums and you want to, like, make sure children can eat lunch, which it's not an insult. It's not controversial. It is a fact. Like, the Buddha touched the earth. You said, how do we know it's true? You can't let yourself get so gaslit that you're suddenly like, I don't know if the sun is shining or facts are facts. And, children need to eat lunch and people need healthcare. And when they have healthcare, instead of dying of a root canal, as a Black man did, because he never went to the hospital until he went to the ER complaining of a toothache, they're not productive in society. So traditional Republicans, even if they don't care about this Black gentleman, would care about him being able to do a job and being a productive member of society. So I think ultimately, like, historically, Reagan, Eisenhower, whoever, we were all able to agree in America that, like, from the perspective, as you said, of your ancestry and of mine, I'm half Jewish. My grandpa fought in World War II as a journalist, actually setting up printing presses in Europe after we had retaken it. So, we're part of the same struggle, basically on the same side. And, from the point of view of wanting to have a healthy, Maha, make America healthy again, a healthy society, we have a lot in common. Like, we care about organic food, we care about, well, we should care about healthcare for all, which isn't some socialist thing. I don't even know what that word means. You just want people to be able to, like, get basic stuff fixed so they can live and enjoy their life. And even if you don't care about people, which is like a pretty sad state of being to be in, you want them to, again, to be productive and not to cost too much money. And when people go to ERs, they cost more money than if they get healthcare preventative. So Michelle Obama was like planting an organic garden and the Republicans hate it. Now I welcome RFK caring about organics and stuff like that. Where I have a problem with Maha is it's not consistent. Like, Trump has already allowed sewage back into water. He's already, gutted the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. I don't think this is, honestly, it's sort of like we're in a relationship in the United States with every single citizen. And you can't be so scared to alienate people, which I don't want to do, because like you said, if you're only talking your choir, you have a limited impact. But you also can't allow yourself to get kind of gaslit where you're saying red is green, like Orwell style. Like you have to, truth is what Dharma means, right? So you can't
that's something so important. I want to get into understanding how you know what is a fact and how you, like, when something is contested, we go to, as journalists, we go to primary sources as much as we can. But sometimes even those primary sources can be contested. There are certain situations where, okay, let me give you an example of some of the propaganda on the left, just so that you can get a sense of why I started getting confused about what's real and what's not. Okay, so I used to trust, for example, CNN. I used to trust them until in the run up to the 2024 election. There was this media narrative on CNN, MSNBC, all these different channels, that was also taken up by Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, that they were all saying that, hey, Trump has said that if he loses this election, it's going to be a bloodbath. Did you hear that that narrative? Trump said if he loses in 2024, it's going to be a bloodbath. Just kind of like parroting, reminding us of January 6th, reminding us of like his dictatorial tendencies and insurrectionist tendencies or whatever, by saying this is going to be a bloodbath. So then I also try to watch things that I disagree with or that are on the other side of the spectrum from what I agree with or what I normally believe. I watched Trump go on Joe Rogan, and I also watched Elon on Joe Rogan. Both of them were talking about that narrative because it was happening at that time that was being parroted in the media. And they both said, like, hey, look, this, what they're saying, it's so funny that they take it out of context so much that a clip of Trump talking about the auto industry losing to the Japanese auto industry, American auto industry losing to the Japanese auto industry, that it will be a bloodbath if the tariffs aren't in the right way, if they don't have the tariffs in the right way. Then and it's such an obvious example of him talking about something economic, like a problem that would happen if there was no tariffs, to be interpreted as like political violence. There's going to be a bloodbath, rather than talking about the auto industry, just taking it completely out of context, and then being completely all over the news. And then I watched that, and I was like, okay, let me go check the primary source. I'm going to go watch the video of Trump talking. And Trump was obviously saying this is, it's going to be a bloodbath for the auto industry if we don't have tariffs, because the Japanese auto industry is going to take over. So when I saw that video, and then the next day I saw Obama and Kamala Harris on stages, saying like, this is a man who says that it's going to be a bloodbath if he loses. Just repeating that same thing, I just suddenly like became like, it was like a disillusionment moment. Like, oh, okay, I was trusting these sources. I thought that these were reliable sources, and they're actually not. They're propaganda sources. Even the candidate, even the people, even Obama, who I had very, very, been very excited when he won, and he was one of my favorite presidents, if not my favorite of my lifetime. That it was like suddenly disillusioned, realizing that actually these people are presenting misinformation or disinformation in this case. Sorry. I think my daughter was she's 4 years old, and she was calling me on the phone from my wife's phone. Sorry about that. So realizing that there was this disinformation coming to me from sources that I had trusted made me think, okay, how much of what I believe is true? How much of the facts that I believe are true are actually misrepresented, are actually half truths or falsehoods? And I started digging into the headlines. I get a news feed on my phone with MSNBC and CNN and all these sources, and I click on. Sometimes I don't even click on them. I just see the headlines of Trump did this person did that, this person is denying science, this person is whatever. And then when you click on it, then the article is obviously very presenting it in a certain way. And then if I actually try to dig down to the primary sources, I the actual video of something happening or a document or something. Sometimes I see that the article is accurate, and but I would say 70 or 80% of the time, it's like exaggerating something or taking something out of context or misrepresenting something. You know what I mean? So, where do you like? How do you discern like what is facts when you have so much misrepresentation, disinformation?
Great question. I mean, I always love where you're coming from because, Suzuki Roshi talked about, like, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert's mind, there are few. So when we become in love with our own solid thinking, we're limited. We could be right, but we also could be wrong. And so we always have to question our assumptions. What I would say is that, Barack Obama, just to restore him, I don't really care if you idolize him or not. I think idolizing politicians is, pointless, but I think he's a really good guy. And I think he's a really good politician. Now, the next day, first of all, there's a lot to answer with what you just brought up, but like, people accuse Trump of saying bloodbath if I don't get elected. I just looked up that quote, and I mean, he repeated it, and it was in context of talking about economics and auto industry, but he kind of went off on it a little bit. He repeated it a few times. If I don't get elected, there will be a bloodbath. And then I Googled just now instances of Trump encouraging violence. It's a really long list. So I think if Obama said, hey man, if he's running for president again, if he said, hey man, if whatever happens, they're going to be killing us, no one's going to report on it the next day because Obama isn't threatening people with violence. In reality, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And I'm happy to list.
So yeah, and I think with the dozens of times, that's where we start to see sort of patterns of data and information that's coming into our brains.
You mentioned context, like people taking bloodbath out of context. I actually would argue that. I would say, number one, you have prajna, right? You're seeing that people are using that to make a political point. But the political point they're making is actually pretty true, even though they're kind of misusing the bloodbath quote.
Well, okay, so
the point they're making is he's encouraging violence. He could have said, if I'm not elected, the economy is going to have some serious challenges because I'm best, positioned because of my experience with 6 bankruptcies, being a total incompetent, and Republicans always do worse economically. I'm just, adding
right. But that's the type of language that doesn't resonate with half of the country, apparently, because they get bored. They're maybe they don't want to think about.
Let me just argue that point because so historically, presidents, even George W. Bush, right, who was kind of reputed to be an idiot by a lot of people, even people who liked him, right? His VP was the genius, and Bush was like the kind of cowboy chewing his. So historically, presidents actually spoke to Americans with respect and instilled democratic values. Trump doesn't. He's a master of communication, but he doesn't do it in an uplifting way. You don't leave his talks or whatever uplifted. You leave them just sort of like, he's so strong and kind of charming, and he'll say naughty stuff that you're not supposed to. It's sort of refreshing. He's not a politician, even though he is. But, it was, I don't know if you remember YouTube for like 10 years, it was common wisdom. Everyone said, short attention span, make your videos 3 minutes. Now Reels, everything's getting shorter and shorter. Jerry Seinfeld is a billionaire. He came in and said, I have no interest in doing 3-minute videos. I'm going to do comedians in cars getting coffee. They're going to be 22 minutes each. I don't care if anyone watches them. He did it, and it was a big hit. So
yeah, and Joe Rogan does 3 hours, and it's the most popular podcast in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So the notion that people have short attention spans is only true if you treat them like idiots and you think they're idiots. If you think they're intelligent, you're a father, right? If you treat your kids like idiot little beings, they'll mirror that or they'll fight that. If you treat them with respect and love, but also honesty, like if they're acting out in an inappropriate way or hurting another kid, honesty, they'll grow up to be amazing human beings. And I think, there should be no room I think what Kamala and Obama were right about is there should be no room for that kind of casual language, because Trump there's 100 instances, if not more, of him actually encouraging violence in context of what he's saying. And I just Googled it. I'm happy to send you.
Yeah, you can send me the link, but here's what I would
Yeah.
recommend is digging into each of those instances, and not you. Obviously, you're not going to spend like 100 hours.
No, but I
digging into
have. I mean, I
100
read journal. I know these instances because I care about our country, and I'm sure there's a few I haven't, but these are
But
in context. He's encouraging
to watch the full video. Let me give you an example. Okay, so there was another one that they kept bringing up, which was the fine people that Trump said that the people in
on both
the
sides.
neo-Nazis were fine people or whatever.
Yeah.
So
The tiki torch
and
show,
if you watch a 30-second clip of it, that
Yeah.
30 seconds of context, it looks like that's what he's saying. But if you actually watch the full video, which was like an hour and a half like speech, then it really is not what his point was, and he wasn't really trying to say that. It was just kind of like he kept getting questions from reporters, and he kept like getting more like trying to answer things in an exasperated way, and he didn't phrase it very well. But if you watch the whole video, the whole hour and a half, it's very different. You can see that his perspective was not about that. He was condemning what was going on. He was condemning the neo-Nazis. And if you watch that video, the whole thing, the hour and a half, it's very different from when you watch the 30 seconds. So there's like sort of like a context window that we have. Like we watch we get a certain amount of context, and we think based on this small amount of context, I'm going to put a data point, a check mark against Donald Trump, a big X over here on the neo-Nazi column or whatever. And then we just kind of have this in our minds without really thinking about all the data points all at once. We kind of just have this pattern in our minds of like, okay, there are all these instances where this guy is an asshole, he's evil, he's saying bad things, he's inciting violence, whatever. We have all these sort of this pattern recognition in our minds that makes us think that. But if we actually dig into each data point, I'm not saying all data points are not valid, but many of them are actually either exaggerated or taken out of context. And that's what I started to notice when I started digging into these things after the bloodbath thing. That was the awakening moment, sort of, where I was like, oh, okay, they really don't care about truth. Like they really don't care. And then starting to digging into each article, each one that popped up in my newsfeed. There was one recently with there was many articles on all different blogs that were saying that Elon went like crazy on this reporter and called her an NPC, like a non-player character, and whatever. And I watched the whole, and that he was like petulant and like off his rocker or whatever. And I watched the whole video, and it like he was like pretty reasonable, like interview. It was like he was trying to give information. He was trying to answer questions in a reasonable way. But basically it was clear he was like in a place in the world where he had just woken up, and he was like bleary-eyed and drinking coffee, and like he lost his temper at this reporter for sort of asking the same question over and over and refusing to answer his questions.
I mean, just without going into everything, like there's nothing more liberal and progressive than kind of what you're doing, which is like deeply trying to empathize with everyone, including and especially people who disagree with you. And that's why when we were texting the other day, like the paradox of intolerance or tolerance is so important for empathetic or caring people to keep in mind, because you are doing a lot of work right now for pretty bad people. Like Elon is well known to be addicted to all kinds of stuff, and there's sexual assault on his resume. There's a lot of issues with his ethics. So to call him like, oh, he's a little tired and just woke up, and like, okay, there is a context for Trump's calls for violence, and I have dug into a lot of them. I'm happy to send you them, and I'm not doing that in an argumentative way, like I'm trying to win. I don't care about winning, honestly.
Me neither.
Like you care about ethics and about our planet and about truth and facts, and the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. You have to have the context, the whole truth. So I'm there with you, but Trump does call for violence, and he, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, that's a racist dog whistle. It's a Jew with ancestors in camps during World War II, you know the power of dog whistles. So when he's saying bloodbath, it's a very deliberate word. And I don't think it's dishonest for Kamala and Obama or anyone to criticize that. What is dishonest there is they're leaving out the context of what he's saying. But he could have again said the economy could struggle if blah, blah, blah. He's saying there will be a bloodbath if I don't win. He repeats it a couple times.
So he said it will be a bloodbath for the auto industry, but
no.
I do.
If you actually read the quotes, it's in the context of the tariffs and auto industry, but he goes on to repeat that without that context at least twice. So it's in the context, but he's not making that point. You know, I think it's fair to say Trump kind of enjoys macho aggression. He has a history of discrimination. I mean, going back to 1973. And, you know, I think it's fair to look at who you're talking with or hear who you're listening with. And I think you're doing a beautifully, you know, like your intentions are good and you want to reach everyone. But should I pause for a sec?
No, I was looking at the video from the Trump bloodbath thing. Maybe it's, I don't know if you want to bring it in or not bring it in, but we can actually watch some of it and see exactly the context.
Well, I just reread it, you know.
Right, reread it where were you reading it?
I'm on factcheck.org.
Okay, and maybe can you share that? Maybe you could share it on the screen. I don't know if you have the sharing settings on the bottom, but just to basically be able to see the exact wording, because sometimes it is that it's the primary source that makes the difference.
Yeah, let's just, we can add that to the video, but let me just repeat something. Like the context of who someone is does matter. It informs how people hear coded things, dog whistle, aggressive language. Again, if Mother Teresa got up and said, if we don't get tomato bisque for lunch, there's going to be a bloodbath, no one is thinking she's threatening anyone. If Trump says it, a lot of people are thinking that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'd later maybe we can both take a look at that video and just kind of see what it looks like. When I looked at it, it to me it sounded like he wasn't trying to do a dog whistle. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am naive about that.
I'm not even saying he's trying to. I'm saying this is who he is. And again, there's a long list and we can go dig into every single one, but a lot of them are he's encouraging police officers to bang the heads of people they've arrested on the police car as they put them in the car. Like he wanted to shoot the legs of the protesters at the Capitol. You remember that one? He was told he wasn't allowed to.
No, I don't remember.
It's a long list. So, you know, just don't be a sucker, you know, like I think what's wise and beautiful about you is you care about the truth and you care about people and not just people who agree with where you're coming from. But like at the same time, you know, there's the Buddhist notion of idiot compassion. It's not saying you're an idiot. It's saying enabling is idiotic.
Right, right. And it's interesting. And I'm just gonna bring this in because it's such a parallel. When you were talking about the paradox of what do you call it, of tolerance,
yeah.
right? And then now you're talking about like idiot compassion. These are things, ironically, that Elon Musk has been talking about recently. And when I was talking to Marianne Williamson, she said, I was bringing up the concept of empathy, and she was saying, oh, you know who hates empathy? Elon Musk says that empathy is the downfall of Western civilization, and it's the biggest weakness of Western civilization. And I had heard his actual quote before that, and I realized that was also taken out of context when Marianne was saying it. What Elon actually said was, and he's been repeating it, is that our weakness and our problem in the Western world is that we have empathy for criminals, but not for the victims of the criminals, and that we need to have empathy for both. And that to me is a reasonable position, that we should have empathy for everybody, not only the criminals, but also the victims of the criminals. And we should try to optimize for, everyone. And I think he was talking about this in the context of, like just free immigration, don't worry about deporting criminals, like relaxing rules on incarceration, like I think and the rule of law. I think that he was talking about it in those contexts, but I think it applies very much to what you're saying. He was also saying that if we have empathy for everybody and we just let everybody come into the country, it will be the downfall of our civilization, because there will be people who are intolerant of our liberal values. For example,
Sure.
I think people will talk about Chinese immigration, that there is sort of state-sponsored Chinese immigration, that there's like terrorist immigration from terrorist regimes and from terrorist organizations.
I mean, a lot of liberals would reply that Elon Musk is deeply incompatible with democracy. I mean, he's literally handing checks to people to vote. I am a journalist.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
I am a journalist, and I just let me respond to some of your points. So I read that quote. I said, well, that sounds really bad. That sounds like Batman villain bad. Let me watch the thing. And yeah, it was in context. He did say, maybe that is, he said it, and he kind of said, maybe that is. And I don't think he's an empathetic person. So again, the context matters. I think he's deeply unempathetic. But that is another instance where people are taking something out of context and misusing it. So going way back to equating CNN and Fox, I mean, if you want to, journalism 101 lesson is like, there could be some decent people on Fox, most of whom have been fired by now. Fox is backed by Murdoch. There were some good reporters though on Fox. Historically, they got in a lot of trouble legally for lying. And then CNN, which I don't care about at all, I never watch it, has some good programs, and it has some total crap. So I think media literacy matters, because everyone's just surfing their phones on Instagram. They have no idea what the hell they're reading at any moment. So we just need to know, like, Joe Rogan is not wedded to facts. He is entertainment. There's two classifications basically of media. One is journalism and one is entertainment. Entertainment is not bad. Rogan could be right. He could be inspiring. He could be wrong. He could be toxic. He could be all over the map, but he's entertainment. What we're doing right now is entertainment. We're discussing values and opinions. We're not trying to be funny, haha, but we're in the category of like opinion or entertainment. Journalism is journalism, where you're basically just trying, it's like the scientific process, trying to find out what is true and report that. You're not trying to be objective, that's a fallacy, but you're trying to be honest. And like you said, you go to primary sources and you never know. Like on some level, you never know. But if a car crashes into another car, a car crash, you still have to establish who did what and why, and context matters. So I'm not saying that to you in a patronizing way. I just think CNN has a fair amount of good reporters who do good stuff, and then they have some BS. Fox at this point is like pretty taken over thoroughly. I wouldn't even equate them, but I don't even care about CNN. I really don't. I care about journalism, and there's a well-known spectrum. I forget what it's called, but League of Women Voters, etc., have it. It's just like a spectrum of media. And if you pick the ones that are sort of aligned with journalism, not left, not right, not up, down, whatever, but journalism, you're going to be it's sort of like RFK, Michelle Obama. You're going to be eating organic food. Sometimes journalists get it wrong, right? Like New York Times reported that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They went along with the Bush administration. But when journalists get it wrong, they then are responsible for correcting themselves. So journalism at its root is not for profit. It's not capitalistic, but it is a business. And that's why it's struggling right now, so much of it. But its mission is truth and serving the public good. Thomas Jefferson, many founders of the US said, an informed citizenry is required for the survival of democracy. So it's really on us to wed yourself, not to CNN, not to Fox, whatever. And again, I don't grant that they're the same thing. Yeah. Anderson Cooper, for example, I think does pretty good work. But
Yeah.
Get a diet of journalism, subscribe to it. And if you dislike it because it disagrees with you, that could be good for you. And I love New York Times, I love New Yorker, etc. MAGA might say those are liberal. But they have conservative voices on the opinion side that, and you're allowed to disagree with them. You don't have to we're not playing for a team. We're playing for the team of truth, hopefully, and not just truth, but caring. Because literally, just so we don't lose the forest for the trees, we're in a moment where we're crossing the threshold of a livable, habitable planet. And that is not really debatable, sadly. And if we just keep arguing, I like Joe Rogan, I like CNN, I like Fox, whatever, we're going to just wake up with our children and grandchildren living in an uninhabitable world. And that's really heartbreaking. And this world is beautiful. And let's invest in society and this planet.
Yeah, I know that you already are not a fan of Elon and stuff. That makes sense.
But again, if Elon hit his head.
No, I know. But so what you were saying, sorry, you didn't finish the thought when you were talking about Trump. If he hit his head then and changed his viewpoints, then you'd support him.
If he woke up in the morning, it was like, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if we transitioned as quickly as possible to a more sustainable economy? Wouldn't it be great if we invested in the middle class instead of trying to give away?
So isn't it interesting that he didn't he start that way? Didn't he start with the hey, I just made PayPal, I sold it for a lot of money, I have money, I could go retire with
Elon
right now, but yeah, Elon, I could go and retire and live on an island, but I'm gonna focus on saving humanity from climate change. I'm gonna make a electric car company. I'm gonna make solar panels. Right. I'm gonna do all these things, and he did those things even though he didn't have to. Because to me it seems like when he sold PayPal, he had a lot of money, right? So I mean, you would think that somebody like that, he could just either retire or just do something. Maybe he would do something in finance if he really wanted to make more money. But why would someone with that kind of payout, who's just sitting on top of the world, essentially has so much money that he doesn't need to do anything? Why would somebody like that go so hardcore into what was at the time a silly electric car venture that everybody thought would fail, solar panels, trying to, for at least based on what he said, to save the world from the climate crisis? And why would somebody do that at that point? And then at this point, completely sort of flip on it and say what, those things are not as important as I thought, and maybe the more important thing is XYZ. Why would, you know what I mean? When I look at that trajectory,
I think you just answered your own question. I mean, quite honestly, I think he's flipped from black to white, from night to day. He doesn't have an inner core of caring one way or the other. I think when I said he had to do those things, who was president? He was trying to appeal. He literally has a tweet 7 years ago. It's not even that long, saying, gay pride, LGBTQ, climate change, blah, blah, blah. All of that matters in his beautiful rainbow emoji. Mm-hmm. He's a master, like Trump, marketer, right? Communicator on some level. And he could not have built Tesla without, as government should do, subsidies, creating a whole new, economy, an electric vehicle economy. That's not something historically that individual entrepreneurs can do without societal support. So he needed that, and he was appealing to his customer base. And then at a certain point, and he was quoted on Rogan and elsewhere, he said, if Trump doesn't win, I'm in big trouble. He went all in on Trump. And does it make sense? Not necessarily, but he's gone for it. And
so you think, so just to understand how you're seeing it, when I was seeing him going into the electric car company business and whatever, I was actually thinking about doing the same thing at that point before he went into it. I had just finished my work with a company, and I had some experience building companies and had some money, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go create the Natural Energy Organization, NEO, or Green Energy Organization, GEO, or whatever. I had these thoughts in my mind. It didn't end up happening because I broke my neck in a motorcycle accident and lost all my money and whatever from is a long story in Thailand. That's a whole other story. But when I saw him doing that, I was like, okay, cool. Like this guy's doing it. That's good. And I felt like I could relate.
It was incredibly helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I can relate to this guy. He's trying to save the world. He's trying to do the same thing that I was trying to do.
I think we now know he wasn't trying to save the world. He was trying to build a business, and he did it incredibly daringly, but he also had vast support from the US government, and he wouldn't have made it without that.
So you think that it like his whole foray into sustainable electric cars and things, all that stuff was like a cynical ploy to get government funding from like the ESG funds or whatever?
Well, you're asking me to read someone's mind. Like I've lived in Boulder. I'm friends with Kimball Musk's brother. They sold a company that was not PayPal, just to clarify, but it was bought as part of PayPal. They had a lot of money, but they're young guys. They're like 30 or something at the time. And again, Elon Musk was technically an illegal immigrant. They've talked about that openly. But when you have $350 million or whatever at the age of 30, do you want to retire? Most people would get bored being on a beach in Baja, having sex with everything that moves after a couple weeks, right? They have egos, like a lot of people, especially people with huge success at a young age. So honestly, I don't really care what his motivation was. I care what he does. And what he's doing is harming people. I mean, Doge was immensely stupid. I mean, he gutted the parks department. I'm not trying to offend MAGA people, by the way. I'm really not. MAGA people, like all of us, love the national parks. They're America's greatest success. And he gutted their staff, and they were hugely profitable. So they're not saving money by gutting them. If you want to treat it like a business, government is not a business. Government will invest in something like Tesla for 10 years before it pays off, right? But if you want to treat it like a business, gutting the national parks, let alone, NOAA or NIST or any of these agencies, doesn't make sense. Getting rid of all the vaccine experts, I mean, you got to have a pretty cynical worldview to think all these scientists are devoting themselves to poison, without getting the whole vaccine thing. Like there's a lot of different diseases going around and we're totally unprepared. You can talk about cybersecurity. They got rid of those people. Like we are sitting ducks right now, and a Republican, an old-fashioned Republican who I would disagree with would say the same thing. Like we are just exposed. So do I care about Elon's inner motivation? Not really. I think it's transparent. Here's
why I think the motivation is important. Because if his motivation is idealistic in some way, like he is seriously, when he expresses his concerns, he says the United States has trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. We have debt payments is like 30% of our current budget. That's completely unsustainable. We're going to go bankrupt as a country. China and these sort of dictatorships in the East are going to take over, and we're going to be basically fucked as a country. And Western civilization will fall, and then his whole at least based on what he says, his motivation to get humans to Mars so that we can survive catastrophic events here on Earth, for example, and to be multiplanetary and whatever. These things that he says, if you take them at face value, if you believe that he's not lying, then he essentially, if that's his motivation, then you can be like, okay, let's look at what is actually happening with Doge. Let's actually dig into like what's being reported by whom. Elon says that the reporting on Doge was extremely propagandic or whatever, one-sided, because there are so many people that were benefiting from all the government money that were going to a lot of these programs that were wasteful or fraudulent or whatever. I mean, if you listen to him, and if you believe he's so if you believe that his motivation is not evil and that it is idealistic in some way, then you can kind of listen. You can kind of try to dig into things, and it takes a lot of time to dig, but sometimes you can find that certain things are true. Sometimes you can see that certain things are false or misrepresented or exaggerated. And you can do the same thing on the other side of the story of the people that are attacking him. If on the other hand,
I don't grant any of that. No
okay.
way.
Okay.
I think
If on the other hand,
wild false equivalencies, like people, experts throughout our government have devoted themselves to public service, getting paid 1/5 of what they could in the private sector, like where Elon is, richest guy in the world. He has yachts, he can do whatever he wants. These are people who did the opposite. They did like government service. Are there some bad employees in the government? Yes. Could you have looked at their performance, blah, 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 in a mature way, like the Clinton administration did, and fire a bunch of people? Yes, you could do that. He didn't do that. He fired like wide swaths of people. Of course, they're going to be offended, but most of them are offended because they care deeply about the work they're doing, like USAID, versus, I mean, the propaganda coming from a guy who owns his own propaganda machine, Twitter. That accusation, that's rich, and no pun intended. Elon is the richest guy in the world. He lies just like he breathes. And sometimes his lies are beautiful. Sometimes his lies are cruel, you know?
Right. So that goes back to motivation when you interpret things as lies versus maybe misunderstanding or being confused. Because I think that people like Elon and Trump even can be confused and brainwashed in their own ways. I think Trump is often brainwashed by Fox, for example. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit and saying he's naive rather than evil or something. But when for example,
I'm not saying they're evil. I mean, we're meditators. Like, these are people operating with egos, and ego makes you lie. Whatever you want to happen, you'll try to get it, either honestly or dishonestly. I'm not saying anyone's evil. So, you know.
Okay.
Don't
well, that's a good clarification. Yeah. That's a good clarification. Thank you.
I think hurting people and hurting our planet is an evil action.
Right.
But
okay. I get you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just what I was trying to I want to finish why I was saying about the motivation being so important. And what you said is totally legitimate. I appreciate that. What I was trying to say is that if you sort of come to it from looking at it like, everybody has mixed motivations, right? Everybody's got mixed motivations. Elon might have a motivation to be, a savior of humanity, a messiah or whatever, and also have at the same time a motivation for power and self-preservation and his own ego and all that stuff. He may have both of those at the same time. So if you look at it like that his actions are mostly stemming from his sort of altruistic leanings, which I think he has some. Then you think, okay, what is he actually doing? What is happening? And you look at the reporting on both sides and you try to dig into it and you try to understand, why is he doing these things? Is this to try to save money on the budget and people are pushing back because they're afraid of losing some government funds, or is it because he is actually doing this for a nefarious reason? So if you look at the other possibility, which is that his motivations are nefarious in some way. For example, there's a lot of connections between Putin and Trump and Musk, as an example. A lot of connections between Putin and those guys, and it's very possible that there is actual either manipulation. It could be indirect or it could be direct manipulation of their actions in order to weaken the United States in order for Russia to gain power. So that is another possible motivation that could be driving one or both of those guys. So but if you can understand the fundamental motivations of somebody, then you can understand more quickly and without having to dive into each specific instance why they're doing the things that they're doing. And
but you're saying
when you understand why, you also can understand whether it's
in that sentence, you're saying exactly what I was trying to repeat to you about the bloodbath quote. If you understand the motivations, where someone's coming from, you can see why they're doing what they're doing. And when he uses the word bloodbath instead of the economy could suffer, and he has this history of racism and sexual assault and, encouraging violence, people are going to talk about it the next day. Should they put it in the proper context? Yes. But do they know the context of Elon overall? I mean, I think there's a balance between saying like, I want to know the truth of Elon's motivations or whatever. And like, I have a life. I don't give a care about Elon. I really don't. I care about him as much or as little as I care about any human being, which is in his case, not much, because if I had that much power, I know what I would be doing with it. I would be putting in a beautiful public swimming pool for people in a poor neighborhood. I would be, funding all the things he just defunded. I mean, literally, I just went to a Juneteenth celebration. I hope people know what Juneteenth is about. It's the kind of holiday, frankly, that Trump is suppressing right now actively, and that's not an accusation, it's a fact. And an artist was not a black artist was not allowed to put his artwork up that included politics, because the hospital, the museum, which is the biggest museum in Indianapolis, it's a very big, powerful, old museum, was scared of the Trump administration. So, you want to talk about censorship in arts or just the effect on society. Like people throw the word fascism around. You look at all the signs that lead to fascism, and we're ticking just about every box. So the frog never thinks it's boiling to death until it is too late. So I don't think it's hype to say, look, democratic institutions, and I mean little d, not the party, institutions that are here, like libraries, the right to protest, all that, they're under attack right now. And that should concern Republicans as much as Democrats, as much as people don't care about politics.
Yeah. So like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I think you and I both perceive these things in a similar way. When I'm pushing back on some of the things that you're saying, it's not because I disagree with fundamentally that my belief system is different, or that my perceptions are different. It's more of an epistemological question of how do we know the things that we know. And I think you addressed this a lot, looking at the ones that are the places that have like a higher journalism score. And I think that's a good idea to also to dig into the primary sources as much as possible, and like seek the facts and stuff like that. But obviously, most people don't have all day to be able to do that, right. And half the country.
That's why sources matter. I mean, I'm not trying to interrupt, but I think primary sources are good, but I think actually what's better is trustworthy secondary sources who consistently do a good job of finding the primary sources. That's why you go to the butcher. I'm vegan, but you go to the butcher because they're doing the hard work for you, right? So find journalists, not who you like. I'm not talking about Rogan. I'm talking about, or the liberal or whatever. I'm not talking about opinionators. Go find journalism, and subscribe to it, support it. And sometimes
can you recommend one or two factual
I can send you the whole spectrum, and people can pick their own. I mean, I think a lot of it is goes back to Colbert's joke back when he pretended to be a conservative, whatever. He said truthiness has a well-known liberal bias. I think a lot of liberalism isn't, I want to, be liberal and dance around the flowery meadows. I think a lot of liberalism, like my style, is I care about democratic principles. I care about equal rights. Further than I do care about equity, not in the DEI controversial sense. I care about the notion of equity is more important than equality. People can look into it, but if you give me and someone who is disabled and has no money the exact equal opportunity to go buy a croissant that's 50 feet away, I'm going to get there first and I'm going to have the money for it. So equal is good, but equity matters. So, that's where public education comes in, et cetera. So I'm not a liberal because I want to be right and MAGA people to be wrong. I'm a liberal because I care about democratic principles. So in that sense, I think a lot of us can come together, MAGA, whoever. We don't need to be liberal, whatever, and just care about voting. I know we all care about voting and honest voting, care about healthcare for everyone. That would make our country much safer and more happy and much richer. Just basic things like that. Like, I think a lot of MAGA people don't want to get involved in foreign wars. I think generally that's really good. Like, we don't want to be at war.
Right. Yeah. So you were saying that, the MAGA and the liberal people can come together about certain issues. You were saying specifically about healthcare. I think that there's a lot of people in the conservative side, they don't like the universal healthcare thing because they've been told a lot of like propaganda by the healthcare lobby, the health insurance lobby, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there are also some that I think that are like really believe in what's libertarianism, like in small government, and part of me when I'm looking at the motivations of people or thinking about the motivations of people, Elon's actions could be, especially with Doge and things like that, could be interpreted through the lens of he believes in limited government and that financial responsibility and things like that. I don't really see the malicious motivation of why he would do something like that if he didn't have a motivation to actually save money. Do you see a
Yeah, he
different
was
motivation
under
there?
threat of a lot of different consequences, lawsuits,
Mhm.
etc., from the government, and the overlap with the agencies that he targeted and where he was under threat of consequences was more than one for one.
So like the
So,
FAA, for example, he gutted the FAA and then they let him shoot his second Starship and that exploded over
and it's a
Miami, which
long
yeah.
list. People can look into that. I don't really care about him or his motivations, but what I do care about is, like Obama said many years ago about libertarianism, he said it's a great theory if you're 12. Because what's the most popular basic thing that every local politician promises? I'm going to fix the potholes, right? Libertarians hate potholes. Your tire goes into them. You can like literally damage your car. That's really irritating. Who pays for the roads? Society. Taxes. People say taxes are theft, right? Taxation is theft. That's a very popular libertarian or MAGA quote. Taxation is theft until you're angry about getting your car in a pothole, right? I mean, Elizabeth Warren went on a rant that was beautiful like 10 years ago about this. She was like, if you're a successful entrepreneur, good for you. But you have to acknowledge that your employees have basic education thanks to society. Your product is delivered on roads, perhaps by a post office, thanks to society, et cetera, et cetera. Every step of the way. There's safety regulations, OSHA, which has also been gutted. So, I mean, they're
Yeah.
getting rid of Energy Star, which saved consumers hundreds of dollars every year, making products more efficient. Like, this is not a well-intentioned cutting of government. Clinton, you can like him or not, I don't really care, but he definitely bought into the triangulation. Like, there's liberal, there's conservative, let's do the third way. And he did try to make government smaller. He balanced the budget, had a surplus, which Bush promptly spent with the Iraq War, etc. So with the Bush tax cuts, I mean, who on earth, name me a MAGA person. I don't mean a politician. I mean a good human being who could come on this show with us, who likes the idea of taking, like we're about to sell off 250 million acres of public lands, right? We're going to start small, but 250 million acres are in the law that they're writing, right? And that's just going to pay for like 0.01% of these historic tax cuts to the richest people. People like me will get just a very little bit. Super rich people get more, etc. I think our society is sick. We're actually sick with idolizing rich people. You know why I'm not super rich? I could have sold Elephant for $70 million 10 years ago at our peak. I could have. And I had this weird thing called ethics where I was like, I actually care about climate change and stuff. I want to keep going. So do I regret not selling it? For sure, sometimes. But at the same time, if I had sold out on my own ethics, a lot of people look up to me. And that's sad. You're not right because you're rich. You're just playing the field well. Often doing the ethical thing, you're a father. You can do what you want to do, or you can do what you kind of have to do to be a good father. So
Yeah.
often we
Yeah.
make sacrifices because we care about people on our planet, right?
Yeah, I know you're the place that you are is probably going to close in a few minutes. So I just wanted to ask you this because today, for example, I've been doing a lot of political interviews, as you've seen,
Yeah, that was
and
great.
at the yesterday I got an email from somebody in our meditation teacher training program who's from North Carolina, And she said that she felt like, even though what I've been trying to do,
Okay.
Just even though what I've been trying to do is try to create conversations between people, trying to create to understanding, and trying to get people's perspectives. I haven't even gone to the extent that, people, hey, Trump is evil, wrong, or whatever. Trump is doing bad things. I haven't gone to that extent. I've gone to the extent of just trying to understand where people are at and have real conversations with them. So this person from North Carolina that's in our MTT, our meditation teacher training program, said she's pulling out of the MTT program because she felt that we were doing all these political things that were denigrating or hateful toward Republicans and Trump or whatever. Which is, by the way, no, I haven't done anything hateful toward anybody. No Republicans, no Trump, no nothing. All just real, like, empathy, unifying conversations. So I don't know exactly where she's coming from, but I do see that there are so many people in this country that do believe in what Trump is doing, that I would say close to half the country like supports what he's doing and believes in what he's doing. My question to you is, like, why do you think that is? Do you think that they are just brainwashed? Do you think that they're part of a cult? Do you think that they're not, they're low information people that don't know what they're doing, like, that are being brainwashed, taken by a cult leader? Do you think that they believe in something like values based, like they actually believe in racism? Or do you think that they maybe are coming from a different perspective, different set of values that is, like, maybe even a legitimate, some of their values being legitimate? Like, what do you think?
Of that. I mean, I think, it's a vast group, so you can't answer that in a generalized way. I think young men particularly enjoy that Trump is kind of a macho, funny guy, right? Like, it's really tiring listening to politicians who are kind of full of self-doubt and blah, blah, blah. People want a charismatic leader, whether that charismatic leader is Obama or Biden or Kamala or whoever likes whoever. You can say, oh, they're charismatic. I love Beto, right? But Trump for sure is a charismatic strongman. That's not really a compliment. It just means that's what he is. A lot of people like that. I think there is a lot of racism in our country. I mean, just, 50 years ago, women and sexism, etc. 50 years ago, my mom wasn't allowed to have her own P.O. box without the signature of her husband. I mean, we have to remember we're coming out of a history of racism and sexism that is still here. And I think it's the whole woke thing kind of encapsulates a lot of why so many people love Trump. I think, it's really, people don't like feeling apologetic and guilty and like they have to learn to be better people. That gives them a bad feeling, like they're in school again. It doesn't feel good. And when someone comes along and says, forget all that, in fact, F it. In fact, let's go kick some ass. It feels good. Anger feels good. And he's a master at that. But I think if you just come back to basic, I will just one small correction. I don't think he's a Republican. I think he's a Trump. He's a party of one. Traditional Republicans see almost nothing in Trump in terms of their values. I think, basically we just have to come back to like a basic question, which is, do we want to live in a democracy? Because for sure, Trump very clearly has not read the Bible. He's been asked about that many times. He's always like, I don't want to answer that question. I don't know. I can't quote a single thing. He hasn't read the Declaration of Independence, which he just said was a beautiful document of unity. It's literally a disunity. It's saying we're breaking off, to hell with the king. And he did that interview with Terry Moran in the Oval Office. He literally, I mean, it was clear, even if he loved Trump, like he just didn't know what it said. And then he doesn't know the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. So does that make him a bad person? I think he's a bad person based on his actions, but I don't think that makes him a bad person. I just think it makes him not interested in democracy. I am interested in democracy because it's a hard-won privilege that millions of people over generations have fought for peacefully and in wars. And then climate crisis, again, whatever we look like or how rich or poor we are cooking this planet and we don't have to. I biked to this cafe. I get my coffee for here. not trying to be woke. I'm just trying to be responsible. And that's a Republican value. And if we cook our planet, do you think Elon's taking you with him to Mars? No, it's going to be very limited. You're going to be in a bubble. You're not going to, like, I just went to a museum and parks where there's flowers and bees. And then we went and had amazing vegan Mexican food at a Mexican restaurant, like a legit place. None of that stuff's going to be on Mars. We are on a miracle of a planet here.
Yeah.
And as the Bible goes into, I have the environmental Bible, which highlights all the eco aspects of the Bible. This is God's gift to humankind and to all of us. Let's take care of it. So
yeah, I agree. I know you have. I know you have to go. If there's like one more minute, I could ask you one question, which is really, it's the core of what I want to understand from you. You clearly are taking the tact of, go full out, say your beliefs, and really like, as a meditation, as a leader in a meditation space, that does help the world in some way, but it also can push some people away. What I've been doing recently and is to try to bridge understanding between the groups and not push people away, but rather to try to bridge understanding. Do you think that one way is better than the other? Do you think that my way is like from cowardice or something, or do you think that that there's value in both and that both need to be done?
I think, that's kind of why we wanted to do this conversation. I think if the motivation is genuine, I think that's beautiful. There's different approaches for different people. Sadly, we're in capitalism, which is fine or not fine. Capitalism is an evil. It just can be used for evil, or it can be used for good, or it can be neutral. Sorry, I gotta go. I think most people who do it don't want to lose fans or followers. I don't care if I do. If someone's lying or being hateful, they're gone. But if they disagree with me, and that's why I was arguing with the Marianne Williamson comparison, and again, I don't know her POV, but I'm not going to block or delete or whatever someone's view if they disagree with me. If they're actively hateful or lying, even if they don't know they're lying, if they're kind of actively lying, they're gone. People need to pay attention to facts, and I'm happy to lose thousands and thousands of followers and fans because of that. But over time, loyalty, not to my beliefs, but to being genuine and having dialogue, will win us different fans. So I have to go.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Waylon.
Love what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And maybe I'll take a conscious breath and then you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great day.